So it's called inCOPnegro Aftermath because we're really looking at what happens in the wake of police violence in the community and how do we heal from that. So we're trying to talk about after all of it's said and done, after the news outlets go away, after there's no more viral video, and there's this feeling that no one really cares anymore, what is that community left to do and how do they heal with the trauma that they've experienced?
I'm fighting a war within myself, playing a role, but all the chords can play themselves.
So Flacco is the essence of that character called the questioner, who's spending the entire time questioning, am I a hero or am I a villain?
For me, this Argentine shield reflects the true society. You want to change the world, you need to look at the proprieties. Hero or villain advice versus a dilemma, first aid.
The questioner is a character that is in between two worlds. So it's in between the community and how the community is responding to a current tragedy and being on the side of, we'll say, law enforcement for, air quotes.
See, it's a war going on outside, you better pick a side.
When I first started this, I was really curious about the black officer experience because one, I've just never heard a black officer talk about their experience.
It's way too rare that a wave could ever stem the tide.
I'm not the mouthpiece for the performance, but being the only lyricist, I do understand my responsibility of every time I open my mouth and I say something from my character in the performance, I have a very big responsibility to make sure that we're leading the story where it needs to go. If I need to be by this light right here so that triggers Dominic to move this way, it's the same thing with the lyrics. Like how I perform and how I move and how I write is going to affect the rest of the show.
Well, George Floyd was murdered, and it was really the days and the weeks afterwards. So me and my wife were pregnant at the time with our first child, and at one point I realized that I'm gonna have to teach my black child about police, and I just never considered that that's a step in my trajectory in my life. So over the years, I think like a lot of black people have had run-ins with the police. Up to this point, I estimate about 45 times since I was a child up until now.
My experiences were just always knowing that this interaction can go from a parking ticket to fatal and not knowing how that's gonna go. Every situation is kind of like that.
The week after I got my license, I was at soccer practice in Talmadge, Ohio, and it was February, and it was cold, and it was snowing, and I got stopped by a police officer, and it was the first time I got stopped by a police officer as a new driver. Again, I've been driving for a week. And then the second cruiser came in, and then the third cruiser came, and then the fourth cruiser came. I was asked to get out the car, I was put on the hood of the car, I was patted down, and this kind of whole moment happened for like a good 20 to 25 minutes of being questioned and things like that. And I'm in soccer shorts in the middle of winter. And then at the end, they're like, oh, your tail light was out. And then they let me go. When it first starts happening to you, there's a lot of fear. There's some shame because you assume you're doing something wrong and that you're the reason you get in trouble. But then after a while, there is a level of numbness to the feeling because it's something that you expect. So now if I get stopped by a police officer now, there's like a routine that you go through. You kind of know what's gonna happen. You're like, oh, yep, this makes sense, it's been a while. The feeling kind of lessens over time. When Jayland Walker was murdered, one of the things I started really paying attention to is how everyone was reacting to it. And how you see that cycle of this explosion of people protesting and people really trying to show that this is wrong.
He was challenging me to potentially be a part of something that made me uncomfortable the second that he said it. And artistically, those are the kinds of things that I try to be a part of, or I try to put myself in positions to be able to grow lyrically, production-wise, artistically, just from a mindset. Like, he was challenging my mindset to have a conversation about something that I was just like, I never want to have this conversation, let alone publicly through my art form.
We need to start talking about, well, how do we heal And how do we not talk about healing like this kumbaya thing where everything's gonna be good? It's complicated, it's messy, not everyone gets along in the healing process. And that's really ultimately what Aftermath is about.
I hope they come in open-minded, and I hope they leave open-minded. If they wanted to be police brutality, then be open-minded about that. Community healing, be open-minded about that. Black men, black people not being a monolith, black men being able to be soft, to be heard, to express grief in whatever way that is, whether it's crying, whether it's anger, whether it's dance, whether it's rap. Just being open-minded to a plethora of themes the way that you were when you came in.
It's a gift to the community. We, as artists, have an ability to see all the unsaid things in society and in a city and in a community. So we took all those unsaid things and molded it and created it into something to hand the community for them to do with as they will. And I just hope they feel the care that we put into this for them.
I feel like it's the perfect time for us to be doing this show because the concept has shifted to being around community healing.
A couple years ago, I would have said, this is really important because it's this conversation that's happened nationally. Like, it's happening over and over. We have to have this conversation. But now, I think it's important because it's home. It's here. It's now. It's what's happening to us in this community. And there's a lot of pain in this community, but we still have to figure out, so what do we do now? It's important to figure out how to start that conversation and have that conversation. We're not the only ones having this conversation, but we're the only ones doing it this way.